Like the reason I chose to take my practice in the direction that people can pay what they can afford. Financially, it's not the best decision for me because my practice is probably going to lose money for some time until I break even. And that's my goal, is to just not lose money. But if that allows patients to be seen when they need to be seen, regardless of their ability to pay, it's just like what fills my cup. And I think it's finally in a position where I can do that. And it's really cool. And when I began sharing with people what I'm doing, it's like so many people have reached out asking, how can I do this? They're like, this is my way to feel fulfilled and like contribute to a small corner of the world that isn't scalable. It's not profitable, but it is what gives you the, I think, just like the excitement, and like it also like reigniting the passion for why people went into medicine.
Welcome to How I Doctor, where we're bringing joy back to medicine. My guest today, Dr. Paulius, I don't even know how to describe him. He has built a career that refuses to fit into a single box. He's a family medicine physician, but he's also a game designer, a writer, a community builder, and someone who seems to treat creativity as an essential part of his job description. Instead of following the predictable route that most of us take after residency, Paulius has built a portfolio of projects aimed at making medicine better. From designing educational tools that make learning fun, to experimenting with new models of primary care, to leading a community of like-minded physician nerds like myself, Paulius is doing it all. He's not just talking about fixing medicine, he's really building things and testing ideas and learning out loud and sharing his knowledge with other people. And I think he has a lot of vision and a lot to say about where primary care needs to go, what it needs to do, what the heck is direct primary care, and honestly, how doctors can reclaim some of the creativity that maybe brought us into medicine in the first place. Dr. Paulius Mui, welcome to How I Doctor.
Wow, Graham, that is quite the intro.
I'm your hype man. Paulius, let me just start with a question I tried to ask you before we hit record. How do you even define yourself?
I think my identity at the core is probably someone, professionally, I would say I'm a physician, right? I still practice. I still care about patients a lot. But I would say that's probably about 10% of my time when actually doing patient care. I think the rest of the time, I'm someone who's exploring my curiosities, and I'm pretty committed to primary care. I think I'm someone who likes to build. I like to connect different domains, and these days I straddle the technical and the clinical worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Paulius, you and I connect and enjoy talking because we both like to build and tinker and, figure out new ways to solve old problems, I think. You're also like extremely well connected to every other person. So where does that all come from? Are you just an extrovert? Are you just innately curious about every other person you meet?
I mean, I'm an extrovert, so that helps, right?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm an intro. I hate
Oh,
people
really? Okay.
generally. So
Well,
yeah,
I think people can't tell that about you, I think,
I
if they
hide
get
it
to know
well.
you. Yeah, I do get charged up from conferences, right? And I also really think that things get done through people. There's a book someone told me about a while back. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it's called Who Not How. And it basically crystallized things that I kind of innately came to realize. And it's not about asking how to get something done, but like who can help you accomplish this. When you work with people who have the same vision as you, the more you can accomplish. And so like basically surround yourself
Sure.
with people who can help you get stuff done, or that you can help them accomplish things.
Is there a thread that kind of connects all the dots in your head, or is it just, oh yeah, I think this is interesting and this other thing is interesting, so I'll do both of those?
I mean, I do think people are at the core of all of it. And I think it's sometimes what the healthcare system has forgotten, right? There's all these policies and regulations, and it just upsets me how easy it is to forget humanity and what we do. And I think that all things I'm interested in, whether it's, the reason I chose primary care is so that I can get to know people. I think the reason that I build technology is so it can enable people. And ultimately, I think, it's so cool to actually see everyone else build things that will make AI better, or the tech is going to perform, incrementally more efficient and whatnot. But like ultimately, it's about supporting people with all these tools and widgets and whatnot, and that's where I'm betting on.
It's interesting that you said that things upset you. I similarly feel like the things that I get excited about and like to build and create are stuff that really bugs me. Like that gets under my skin that I'm like, "Oh, it shouldn't be this way. There's got to be a better way to do this."
It took me a while to figure out that I'm not the only one. And I think, like you mentioned, community has been a big part of my work. And it's almost a byproduct. It's just a vehicle of a way to let other people into the same universe and the same problem space. And it's almost like it's a lot more interesting to find the right problem to work on with other like-minded misfits, I would say, than actually obsess over a specific solution, because solutions are going to come and go and they're going to be more reflective of the times and policies and technologies. But the problems that we really should be solving, I think, are like fundamental to how do we want to move humanity forward, and like what do we prioritize and so on.
I think the community piece is important because it makes you feel less alone and like less crazy. Like, hey, does anyone else think it's crazy that we have to do XYZ in order to get a patient a medicine or do a test? Because I think that often is not spoken about by physicians, that we just kind of accept the way things are. But it takes a certain type of person to maybe question that and say, well, why do we have to do it this way? Why this doesn't make sense, or this is harming my patient, or it's wasting my time.
Yeah, and what I actually have noticed is that a lot of people think that they need to be an expert in order to share their voice and their perspective. And it's actually really all you need to do is just come from a place of inquiry and share the questions that you have, and you'll find that there's a lot more people thinking the same thing. I fell into health tech somewhat out of frustration with traditional systems where I'd be in committees and have all these, to me, wonderful ideas of how we can make things better, which were often met with, "Oh, let's create a working group next year," and my term was gonna be up or something like that, and I think it's important to pump the brakes sometimes and prevent bad things from happening, but then you run into this whole other universe of people with lots of resources and hyper optimism, which is, like, very different from the pessimist perspective, and I just gravitated towards technology because it was a bit more just easier to influence optimists, I think. And I think many people in technology and entrepreneurships are pretty open-minded and they're willing to learn. Yeah, and so that's kind of how things started for me, and I started blogging about things that I was just didn't make sense. Like I remember seeing an article that talked about unbundling primary care or unbundling family medicine. It was from like CB Insights, and I just didn't know what that meant. Like, why would you break a specialty into different pieces and have different apps for all the things that we do? And I just reached out to a bunch of the logos that were unbundling things and realized that many of them were full of hot air and just needed a little bit more context.
What's your ideal version of maybe what a clinician and a technologist or a tech company partnership or working relationship looks like?
I mean, I think if people come from a place of mutual respect and curiosity, I've met too many companies that when prompted about why they don't involve clinicians is because they don't think that that's necessary to be financially successful.
Huh. Like, is it that they don't understand it, or they think they can get away with it? Like, or that it's not a
Yeah,
like it's too expensive or not necessary?
it's more that they know how the business world works. And
Mm.
so the clinicians and the patient perspectives are often the backdrop, right?
They're building a business solution that will drive revenue, not necessarily the solution that includes the physician patient perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's just there are. So it's the kind of the principal agent problem that, is prevalent in healthcare. If people who are using the tool don't necessarily purchase the tool, and when you're asking about like what's an ideal partnership, I think one, it's having a common language, because our worlds are full of jargon, and what we do with patients, right, like we help translate medicalese into patient speak, regular speak, and I think the same thing is with the tech world, with the business world. And when people learn how to align that they're in reality, they're talking about the same thing. And when they can agree that they are solving the same problem, that is a cool way to team up.
Hey doctors, AI isn't coming, it's already here. Whether it's scribes, risk prediction, or chatbots, AI is reshaping medicine right now. And that's exactly why I created the AI Secrets for Clinicians webinar. Along with my friend and Valdar Health founder, Dr. Sarah Gebauer, we compiled a practical guide featuring a roundup of the best tools, prompting tips, and educational resources for all clinicians to get started with AI. This is the starting point. You need to learn how to use AI safely, ask the right questions, and take the lead on incorporating this new technology into your practice. Visit offcall.com/AI guide. That's offcall.com/AIGUIDE to get started. Thanks. Paulius, what is XPC?
At the core, it was discovering what is primary care. The origin of the story is Kenneth Q, who you've had on the podcast, and I were just kicking ideas around, and we were like the misfits in our group of friends that just wanted to geek out over this, and because we've known each other since med school. And then we started, from texting to writing, and then we invited more friends, and it was just a real experience that someone would hang out and talk primary care. And the name was kind of a joke, but it stuck because we were trying to think of a placeholder name of X equals primary care. And what do you put in the X? Is it advancing primary care, improving primary care, accelerating it? And then I think we just needed to pick something for the website, and it just stuck. And so we were solving for X, trying to understand what is primary care, what does it mean to people, patients, technologists, and so on. And then when I finished residency, I got a really cool offer to basically have like a physician executive gig right out of training, which is pretty unusual. And so I took that up, and I wanted to not lose touch with the builder community and still have an ear to the ground, but I knew that I couldn't go to all the conferences and do all the things the way I normally did. So uh, my idea to solve this problem was to create a fellowship, which was really about mentorship, and in a way where I would be able to support individuals who want to build in primary care but maybe lack the context and are coming from another industry, or just for people whom I could pull my social capital and invest time, which is really a lot more scarce than money at the end of the day.
When you think about the current state of primary care, what is working well and what is fundamentally broken in American healthcare?
I think primary care still has leadership that really reminds everyone else what is at the core of the specialty, right? Like the more of the academic definition of primary care is the 4 Cs, the first contact, comprehensiveness, care coordination, and continuity. And I still think that it's really important to go to the roots and actually not experience mission drift, and remember that a lot of this is in supporting patients in different ways to make care accessible and continuous, and the the problems are multifaceted. There's structural, financial, workforce, all over the place.
If you had one thing you could fix tomorrow to re-architect primary care, what might that be?
Out of those functions that primary care serves, I think continuity is what makes us quite special compared to other specialties. That's the reason I kind of chose it, because you get to know people over time.
The intent is you see this person over and over and over again. And yeah, I guess that's not really the intent of most other doctors.
That's right. Yeah. And I think oncologists get to experience that.
Sure. Yeah.
decent amount. And there's so many forces that work against us, when the physician moves or the patient moves or they change insurance or the schedule doesn't allow for availability. All of that, fragments our experience and the context that we build over time. Like, for example, I had a patient whom it was the first time interacting with healthcare because they were younger and they had a chronic condition, and it was incredible. I saw them every few months over the 3-year residency period, but then we just had to say goodbye pretty much because I moved to a different place. And in today's world, we totally could have kept that continuity alive. I do think that if PCPs had somewhat of the unrestricted license to practice who truly indexed on continuity, that would change the game in so many ways. And I think it's okay to have multiple people in the care team, but that one person or one clinical team who knows you the most over time, who doesn't need to scan the chart and kind of like dig up all the old records, that value compounds over the years. And that's what initially drew me just to go into family medicine. I picked a rural residency program because it was so cool. Like you had the community and you knew the patients. So if we can figure out how to fix the continuity piece, I think that'd be really fascinating.
Do you think that patient expectations have changed in ways that make traditional primary care or even just traditional healthcare broadly need to change?
Everyone is really frustrated. And when you're just constantly living in a frustrating environment, you're basically sitting in traffic all day long in your healthcare experience, right? And like
And that's a good analogy.
when
Yeah.
you're in that agitated state, uh, people don't behave in their best ways. I am going to say that I think my philosophy is really all about patient empowerment. And I think that at the end of the day, we're all patients. And so, whatever we can do to allow people to seek out things that they want, I think that's really important. And if those things are not what, guidelines recommend or is not best practice, like no one should be forced to enable patients that way. But I do think in the US, our system allows for people to get what they want generally, especially if they have cash. I think a great relationship between patients and managing their expectations and their clinical teams are around trust. Because sometimes the mismatch happens is because there's some bias or some assumption that isn't shared, and finding that commonality and common ground is like kind of our job. And then also, I think it has to be both ways because oftentimes patients do know more about their illness than the clinician, right? Like the information asymmetry is gone in at least the cognitive sense. Patients can look up things in much more detail than their doctors. And that's where like the training of future generations is really interesting because we need to prepare for like a different approach of how we handle those situations. And how can we empower like physicians to be system thinkers, not just like knowledge carriers?
Yeah, I mean, if we take patient enablement kind of to the nth degree or assume that, you know, I don't know, in 10 years, all patients are going to have way more enablement or being have a lot more health literacy. What do you think that ends up changing on the physician side?
I guess I'll like buffer my answer by thinking about what happens outside of the US, right? So I've done
Sure,
a
yeah.
lot of
I think that's a great example, a way to look at how change happens and what things might look like.
many of the trips that I've done to Guatemala or Honduras or Peru. I mean, people can go over the counter and get the medications that they want if they can afford them, right? And so
Yeah.
there are all sorts of problems that exist on antibiotic resistance and so on that that patients I think don't appreciate. Individual patients have a lot of agency and autonomy, and they're able to self-treat and medicate just fine. So I think we're still converging on a balance that works for everybody here.
Well, you mentioned that we may need to start training medical students in different ways. What does that look like? Like, what are some of your concerns, and what are thoughts about how we could address that in med school?
Yeah. Well, one, I think it's not just medical students, right? I think because the way we deliver care has changed and the team-based model is really the way that we take care of patients. Trying to figure out how to work together with everybody and is going to be the hard part. So, for example, like Anthropic put out this interesting economic index. And they made a point about instead of looking how occupations as a whole are going to change, look at the tasks to do within those occupations, how they're going to change. And so I think for us, we have a very poor insight into the types of skills that we have across different credentials and different team members that do care, right? So like think about like the heated debates that exist between medical training and NP training and PA training. And I think that's kind of what makes it so challenging that in a field like primary care, where almost everything under the sun is fair game, how do you measure and then develop those skills in a way that actually supports workforce needs? And I think that's what we should be trying to figure out how to answer rather than try to optimize just medical education
Mm.
for, a select group of people, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, if I guess it's certainly true. We call everybody doctor, but the work that an ER doctor did 50 years ago, I mean, ER barely existed as a specialty at that point, but like we still called them doctors. But the work that a primary care doctor did 50 or 100 years ago, the tasks are probably fairly different from what they do today. But we call them both PCPs or primary care.
that's right. Yeah. And it's like, I'm a big fan of Clay Christensen's book, Innovator's Prescription, and kind of talks about how, the prediction of the way our roles evolve in healthcare. And I think patient becoming part of the team is going to be a really vital role because that kind of connects to that whole empowerment piece is, what used to be in the hands of specialists is really now becoming at the fingertips of PCPs, so to speak. And then, through the same logic, it's like what used to be in the hands of PCPs is now becoming at the fingertips of patients and so on. And so like how can we create a system that supports that? And is it that clinicians are really or physicians are in the domain of systems thinking and then you have more other members of the team that are able to tackle specific tasks? I really don't know, but I think that's something that I'm really interested in understanding better so that we could support the development of those skills and really help with answering the workforce readiness question. Right now, it's a lot of turf wars and policy battling, and I just don't think that's the right way to go.
Paulus, you decided to start your own independent practice. Where did that decision come from? How did you make that decision compared to maybe working for somebody else?
Yeah, because I'm spending more and more of my time on the technology side, I really don't wanna lose touch with patient care. I think it's really a privilege to take care of patients. It reminds me how hard patients have it, how hard it is to navigate the system, and how many unanswered questions there are. So, personally,
It's easy to forget that,
it
honestly.
totally yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
kinda have to get slapped in the face, like, every so often
Yeah.
to just, like, remember the reality and the struggle because, I've actually had this conversation with someone where they're a successful entrepreneur, a physician, and they really were saying that if you continue to maintain patient care, you'll be less good at the business side of things because you'll have to split your attention, your time, and so on. The way I reconciled like our disagreements is that he was really talking about being a coach of like a sports team where I was really embodying the captain approach. And I feel like I'm at that stage of my career where it's really about being a captain of the team and captains play, right? At least to my knowledge, as opposed to
Such
coaches.
a great I love that, Paulius. That's great. Yeah.
And so I'm just at that stage where I want to be a captain and part of the team. And I think it's really important to be there with people because then you internalize what matters. And certainly coaches have such an incredible impact on how teams perform. It's just, there's just different seasons.
And, yeah, I really love that. And the captain is has to keep his or her skills up in playing the game, but is also kind of like a leader and like translating what the team needs from the coach as well.
Yeah. And then how do you build trust, right? Like people trust captains in different way than they trust coaches. And there's a different power dynamic and collegiality and all of that. And so it depends, right? Like where do you feel comfortable? Just to get back to your original question about starting the practice is It's really hard to do primary care full time for many people. And what's been so interesting lately, lots of individuals, especially those that have had clinician researcher career, much of that research is disappearing. The research support because NIH funding is getting pulled and all of that. And so now what I'm seeing is that people are not willing to give up their clinical, but they're also not willing to go full time clinically because they just cannot handle it because of the pressures of their employers, which are often health systems put upon them, right? Kind of the assembly line medicine, and and so I guess I just shared that just to show that individuals who can work full time choose not to because it's just simply really hard.
So, Paulius, I actually want to get back to that because you glossed over it, and I think it's a really good question. Why is it hard to be a full-time primary care doctor?
I think it's really hard because of how hard is medicine. Medicine is from the outside as it's like you're looking at the tip of the iceberg. Most of what we really do is not on the internet. It is so contextualized to the patient. It is so contextualized to the system in which we work. And the work is invisible a lot of the time. It doesn't have ICD 10 codes. It often doesn't have written down protocols. It's just infrastructure wrestling. There's parts of like emotional work that goes into it. And I think probably a big component is like just the emotional toll that it takes to navigate like to sit in traffic, right? Like that is what is so frustrating. So it simply just becomes unfeasible. And then medicine becomes less rewarding when that's all you do. When you're just fighting fires. And like the reason I chose to, take my practice in the direction that people can pay what they can afford. Financially, it's not the best decision for me because my practice is probably going to lose money for some time until I break even. And that's my goal, is to just not lose money. But if that allows patients to be seen when they need to be seen, regardless of their ability to pay, I mean, it's like a self-imposed EMTALA, right? It, it, it's just like what fills my cup. And I think it's finally in a position where I can do that. And it's really cool.
It's great.
And when I began sharing with people what I'm doing, it's like so many people have reached out asking, how can I do this? They're like, this is my way to feel fulfilled and like contribute to a small corner of the world that isn't scalable. It's not profitable, but it is what gives you the, I think, just like the excitement and like it also like reigniting the passion for why people went into medicine sometimes.
And probably the control too, obviously, Paulius. I mean, you get to decide how things work.
Yeah, totally. Right. And so
You have both the responsibility and the power to say, this is how I'm gonna do things.
that's right. So it is one way of just hitting a reset on all the different stakeholders. And it's just at the end of the day, it's like you and the patient type of thing. And I'm actually very interested to see how my practice is going to evolve. My vision was always to have a place that utilizes technology to make our jobs easier. So it is fun to have an R&D shop where basically I get to try out things in a controlled environment. Also, I think it allows me to have a place that's dedicated to teaching. I think that's one thing that's such a missed opportunity. I think as people either build businesses that deliver care or launch practices that they want to scale, is they neglect the learning experience. And medicine is such an apprenticeship type of profession at the core where we just leave that out. And so my dream is really to, have a practice that's dedicated to teaching in a way that meets what is happening in the real world.
You're such a great kind of meta thinker about the systems and how it works and why we do what we do, Paulius. I'm just kind of reflecting and, I'm thinking I could probably ask any physician, why is it hard to be a blank doctor full time? I bet every physician could give me an answer to that. And I'm just curious, I wonder what that says about our entire profession.
Yeah. Well, and can I ask you, Graham, why are you not a full-time doctor?
It's extremely hard. I mean, when I asked you the question, Paulius, I literally said, I mean, I could easily answer the question for an ER doctor. The patients are extremely complex, extremely sick. sometimes have, uh, unreasonable expectations about what I'm able to do as an emergency physician or what I'm supposed to do, what my role is in the healthcare system. I think there's some disagreement there. I always tell people it is the most physical, mental, emotional, and spiritually challenging career, I think, in the world. I'm sure there's other physicians that would disagree with me, but certainly when I talk to ER doctors who are both ER and hospitalists or ER and ICU or something like that, they all say, "Oh, ER shifts are so much worse than working a 12 in the unit or something like that." The other place that we interact a lot is your Slack physician community. We talked about that a little bit earlier. What do you think makes it particularly valuable, and well, why do people keep coming back to it?
Everyone wants to belong to something. And I think when you find your tribe and your people and in ways that it helps you ask better questions about the space that you share in common, right? And for us, it's primary care. I think we really find it fascinating to wrestle with the mechanisms of action of a dysfunctional system. We find it interesting to explore new technologies and hack things together and build stuff together. I mean, it's like the same reason. Like, why do you text friends? Sometimes you just want to connect. I think that's the part that is really fascinating to me. The better I can understand what someone's excited about, the more I'm able to support them in like what they want to accomplish. And I just find that extremely rewarding. Like, there's no way you can put a price tag on it.
Paulius, is there one thing that you've learned from doing this kind of community building physician group thing that surprised you that you weren't expecting?
People are their own biggest barrier in trying to get anything done. And I've been really front row to watching that transform for individuals. So many times someone wants to do something and they're just not sure and they're basically asking for permission to be different. And
They just need a nudge or a kick or encouragement to say, "Yeah, why don't you just do this?"
right, and then
Yeah.
you kind of watch them evolve and develop this whole new skill set or go into and explore a new paradigm. I think that that's kind of what's cool is because this is like a private public space, and so people really get to be vulnerable without doing it en masse like in some other channels.
I think one of the privileges we have as physicians and kind of entrepreneurial physicians, that guy Preston Alexander posted this on LinkedIn. I still think about it to this day. He said, like, well, why don't you go out and just do the thing, build the thing you've been thinking about. At the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you can go back to practicing medicine. Like, it's still a very lucrative, safe, reliable, secure career. So why not just take the little step of faith and just give it a try?
Here's what I've also observed is that people want to do it, but they're often parts of institutions that basically stomp out that creativity potential. Just even for someone to share their opinions and ideas, if they work for a larger entity, is really hard.
Because it's not allowed by the entity, or the entity just like sucks the life out of sucks the creativity out of somebody.
No, I think it's that whole permission to just share what's on their mind and the idea to think differently, and especially to not say anything that maybe will contradict the
Hmm.
status quo.
Yeah.
Like, everyone has these ideas and concepts, they just struggle with being more public about it. And even if someone has a corporate job and they're being supported by the C suite, there's still always what we really want to say and what we say. And um, I think just navigating that is really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Paulius, in our last few minutes, I've got some kind of quick fire questions for you. You ready? One bold idea you wish every primary care clinic would try.
Is figure out how to reach out to future generations and make them part of your clinic, part of your workflow, part of your operations. Because we sometimes have just a mismatch of expecting people to be who they are when they join our teams without giving them an opportunity to basically experience the process of growth. And I'm just really betting from the education perspective of supporting people who are essentially going to be our clinical teams, right? Like at one point,
we're going to need healthcare
that's
too.
right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's my call to action, I think, for anyone is involve learners in what you're doing.
One myth about primary care that needs busting.
Primary care is often the top of the funnel for a lot of businesses. It's often, you know, just just give me the medication or the refill or I want that lab or the full body MRI. And it's actually really hard to do primary care well. I think it's fairly easy to tune out and be mindless about it, especially if the business model is defined by someone who is non-clinical and has investors to respond to. And then another thing I would actually add, if I can, is this is from someone else, but they kind of talked about primary care and scaling it from the perspective of relationships and how people, at least I haven't seen startups that are claiming that they can scale marriage or something like that. Like that just sounds like a ridiculous concept. That's that's really like in a sense like there's a lot more commonality with primary care and marriage or relationship that is committed, and you don't go about scaling it traditionally. And so I think like these frameworks just need to evolve.
Well, Paulius, where can people find you to support the work and all of the hundreds of things that you're always doing?
You can reach out to me wherever you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn a decent amount. I cannot keep up with you, Graham. You are a machine. But I do try to, be there. They can send me an email, paulius@xprimarycare.com. That's a good way to reach out. Yeah, and I usually respond to people.
Paulius, always a pleasure, a true honor to get you on the podcast finally. Thank you for the time and honestly, all the work and the community building you do for myself and everybody else that's trying to improve healthcare through technology and community. Thanks for joining me today. For interviews with physicians creating meaningful change, check out offcall.com/podcast. You can find How I Doctor on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have new episodes weekly. This has been and continues to be Dr. Graham Walker. Stay well, stay inspired, and practice with purpose.